Alex Padilla got arrested merely for asking a question. This is the man who presented to my eye as a complete and utter, emotionally uncontrolled drunk at that press conference.
Senator Alex Padilla, I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter—
Look at him trying to use his mass against that physically smaller security guy. The larger Alex Padilla is trying to use his mass to bull his way past security to get to Kristi Noem. Look at this.
Senator Alex Padilla, I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your hands off.
Hands off. He looks like every drunk I've ever seen in the world, thrown out. And of course, we have the same kind of nonsense from Brad Lander now. Brad Lander went to an immigration court, linked arms with an illegal migrant third world invader being lawfully detained for deportation by ICE, linked arms with this guy to impede the ability of ICE to carry out their lawful duties. Let's take a look at this. Look, see, he linked arms there. He knows ICE is coming. Look how he's grabbing his own wrist. This is clearly impeding ICE's ability to lawfully detain and deport this guy. I'm not interfering with the arrest, he says. I want to see a warrant. I want to see a warrant. I want to see a warrant. He's still resisting. He's still impeding. And by the way, impeding. They don't have a warrant. You don't have a warrant for him. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Just this impeding of law enforcement officers with physical contact, which is what's happening here, is an 8-year felony. An 8-year felony in a penitentiary. That's what LaMonica of the black version of Friends, LaMonica MacGyver, was indicted on. 2 counts of this. Well, 3 counts, 2 of them felony counts, good for 8 years each. She's looking at 17 years in federal prison. And this guy should be 2. And the Democrats think this makes them look good. The Luca Brasi of New York City politics. This, they think, is a good look. He still has his arm linked here. This is the illegal migrant third world invader on the left. He still has his arm linked. He's still impeding these federal law enforcement officers, still committing a felony violation of 8 U.S.C. 111. And he's demanding a warrant. I want to see a warrant. You don't have a warrant. Guess what, folks? First of all, if a warrant is required, all that means is the cops making the arrest or the detention have to have a warrant. In their pocket, they need to have a warrant. If the arrest is justified on the basis of a warrant, then they have to have a warrant. You know who they have to show that warrant to? Nobody. They don't have to show it to anybody while they're making the arrest. They simply have to have it. It's their permission slip to arrest you. But they're not required to show it to anybody. They don't have to show it to the person they're arresting. They certainly don't have to show it to each and every bystander who demands to see it. The warrant is merely a permission slip from a court telling the officers you are allowed to physically detain this person. And once they have that permission slip, they are then allowed to physically detain the person. Their right to detain is not conditioned on them showing a warrant to a bunch of people. It's ridiculous. That's not how it works. Now, later in the process, whoever was arrested, their lawyer might challenge the lawfulness of the arrest. And if he's told the arrest was lawful because of a warrant, then he can demand to see the warrant. So he can challenge whether the warrant was valid. But you don't get to see the warrant while you're being arrested, and certainly a bystander can't demand it. It's like, have these people never lived in the real world? But that's if a warrant is even required. The truth is, For a lot of immigration process, no warrant is required. There's an entire federal statute, 8 USC 1357. Look, these are all things an immigration officer can do without requiring a warrant, including making arrests. They can make an arrest of an illegal migrant, third world invader, with no warrant at all. Not a criminal warrant, not a judicial warrant, nothing. How do they have that authority? Goddamn Congress gave it to them. That's how. They have that authority. So this whole warrant issue is complete bullshit. Utter bullshit. But here's Brad Flanders. Flanders? Flanders like from The Simpsons? Maybe, kind of. Brad Lander, who no one ever heard of before. So this was a huge win for him in terms of his public profile, right? Now the whole country knows who this guy is. He's the lunatic in immigration court. Yes. Sorry, did that not work? I didn't pull it up, did I? Let's try that again, folks. Sorry about that.
This is the third week in a row that I've gone. About 3 weeks ago, Department of Homeland Security changed their practices. And now when they, quote unquote, dismiss cases, they're stripping people of their asylum seeker status and making them subject to expedited
right.
removal.
So this is how this works. This is not rocket science. You're in the U.S. illegally. You're not lawfully present. You're an illegal migrant, third world invader. And you get caught. And we say, you got to go. And you say, well, I'm seeking asylum. Well, okay. You're supposed to seek asylum in the first nation you enter after you fled the bad place you were in. All these people cross through many countries before they get to the U.S. They're supposed to seek asylum in the first one. That's not the hellhole of a nation, their home nation they're fleeing from. But they get to America, they say, I'm seeking asylum. And we say, all right, tell you what, here's a court date, and you can argue your asylum claim to an immigration judge. And if the immigration judge agrees with you, you can be granted asylum, and then you are lawfully in the country. So what happens? 99% of these asylum claims are bullshit. So the immigration judge says, okay, I've heard your story. Sounds like bullshit to me. I'm not granting you asylum. Your case is dismissed. And without the grant of asylum, guess what their status is in the U.S.? They are an illegal migrant third world invader. So when the immigration judge dismisses the case without a grant of asylum, of course ICE is waiting right there because there is an illegal migrant third world invader who is subject to detention and deportation. What better place to find them when they've been adjudicated an illegal migrant third world invader moments before? So Brad is describing this process like it's evil somehow. No. You asked for legal status. You were denied legal status by a judge. That's due process. You got your due process. You got every bit of due process to which you were entitled. And when you're denied asylum status, you're not here legally and you were subject to deportation.
Basically never happened before in New York City or anywhere other than the border. So this group that does a Friends of the Court program called Immigrant Arc invited people to sit in and just observe. And then when people have that
just observe. Did he just observe? Is that what Brad did?
Happen to them, just accompany them out of the building. And
what does that mean? Accompany them out of the building? Do they not know how to exit the building? They walked in by themselves. They need a guide to walk out? No. The purpose of the guide is to impede ICE from carrying out their lawful duties, which is a violation of this federal felony statute. The only reason they're there as a guide is to commit a federal felony good for 8 years in prison.
Last 2 weeks, I was able to just accompany people who thought they might be arrested and detained right.
Why did they think that? Why did they think they might be arrested and detained? Is it possible that it was because they just had been adjudicated an illegal migrant, third world invader by an immigration judge?
Then get in the elevator and go outside and head back to their families. And I worked with one couple whose kids were not with them, and they were afraid they were never going to see their kids again. But
you know how you avoid that problem, Brad? You know how those parents avoid the risk of being deported from the U.S. and their kids being left behind? Stay in Guatemala. The U.S. will not deport you from Guatemala. You'll not be separated from your kids in Guatemala. By the way, any American citizen who's lawfully detained, lawfully arrested, do you think their kids go with them to jail? Anyone who's lawfully detained by the authorities is necessarily separated from other people in their life. Your whole family unit doesn't get to go live in jail with you. When an American citizen is arrested for DWI and their kids are in the car, those kids don't go to jail with the parent. The parent is separated from the child. You don't want that to happen. Don't drive drunk with your kids in the car. Preferably,
the prior families,
preferably don't drive drunk at all, folks. That's not a good idea.
To today, were able to get out of the building. Today, I was just trying to accompany Edgardo to the elevator and downstairs so that he could go back home.
Home is Guatemala or wherever he came from. And ICE is going to send him there. That's what the judge said. That was the final adjudication. That was his due process.
When this happened, all I was trying to do was the things I had done the prior 2 weeks.
That sounds like a shoplifter. It wasn't lawful the prior 2 weeks either, Brad.
Accompany people out to safety. That was my goal today. I sure did not go with any intention.
How were they unsafe in lawful custody? They're not unsafe. They're being subject to lawful arrest. All they have to do is comply. The only person who created unsafe conditions, Brad, was you by forcibly resisting the ICE officers. I mean, I will grant you this looks less than completely safe, Brad, Luca Brasi, but you rather brought that on yourself, didn't you?
Of getting arrested. What I wanted was just to.
By the way, how high is this guy's estrogen levels? Dear Lord.
Be able to accompany people. I was able to accompany one family out of the building, a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, there back home tonight. That's what I wanted for Edgardo and everybody else. And they're being denied their due process. They have shifted the ground, like ripped the ground out from under these people.
They're not being denied any due process. They literally, this guy just came out of immigration court. He just came out of immigration court. His application for asylum was denied. That was all the due process to which he was entitled.
Who did everything right, who registered at the border, who showed up for their hearing, only to find that their opportunity to seek asylum and say, I've got a credible fear of persecution, is gone. And if
it's gone because that is due process. These lunatics think that due process means you keep getting to go to court until you get the answer you want. That's not due process. Due process is not your preferred outcome. Due process is the process to which you are due. That process might well result in an answer you don't like. This answer was, congratulations. You get to go home.
If you don't give people clear due process, why would you expect them to show up for their court hearings?
Why would you expect them to show up to court if they may not get the answer they want? Why would you expect them to show up to court if it might turn out they're not granted asylum? That's like saying, why would you expect criminals to show up to court if they're uncertain that they might not get acquitted? They might get convicted. Why would they show up to court if they might get convicted? If they're not willing to show up to court because they might not get the answer they want, then they are acting lawlessly and they need to be removed from our nation and sent home.
Sure, we will all be worse off if we let them undermine the rule of law. What we could be doing right now, if we had a mayor who actually cared about protecting.
All right, I'm going to skip that because he's running for mayor. So, and of course, it's not just politicians, it's judges. Remember Judge Hannah of the Hannah Dugan of the Diner Dugans. She helped an illegal migrant third world invader escape from her courtroom, escorted him out a secret door so he could avoid the immigration officers waiting in the hallway for him to make his lawful detention and deportation. She helped that guy escape the building. And ICE agents had to chase him on foot down the street to make his arrest. And what does her judicial peers say about this? They say 130 of them filed a brief in federal court because Dugan was arrested and indicted. 130 of them filed a friend of the court brief in federal court saying, hey, you should dismiss this case, Your Honor, because the judge has absolute immunity for her official acts. And it's true that judges do have immunity for official acts. You can't sue a judge for ruling against you in court, for example. But guess what, folks? Immunity does not immunize you for criminal conduct. You can't commit a crime and then claim immunity. You're claiming immunity from civil process, like being sued by someone you ruled against in a court case. If you go out and unlawfully shoot someone, if you rob a bank, if you drive drunk, if you beat your spouse, you don't have judicial immunity for criminal conduct. And what's she been charged with? A civil offense? No, she has been charged with violating that very statute that I just had a minute ago. This one. She's been charged with 18 USC 111. Oh, it might be a different statute, but it's a federal felony immigration violation statute. Indicted, arrested, charged, indicted on her way to federal trial in a federal courtroom. A federal judge has been assigned. So it's even the judges doing this nonsense. Here's Pam Bondi talking about this case and what actually happened here.
So rare for victims to want to cooperate. They wanted to cooperate. They were sitting in the courtroom with the state prosecutor. The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave, while a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
So all these Democrats are fighting tooth and nail, ride or die, for these illegal migrant third world invaders. Thanks for watching this highlight segment of our full-length Law of Self-Defense live stream. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to give us a like and subscribe for more expert analysis on politics, law, and how to be hard to convict. And to watch the full-length episode of this show, just click right here. Stay safe.